I am not an architect. My name is Corey Madden, and I'm the director of the Monterey Museum of Art, which you happen to be in right now. How many of you have never been in the Monterey Museum of Art before? Raise your hands. Welcome. Welcome to all of you. And for those of you who come here frequently, welcome back. I want to thank AIA, which has really created a wonderful partnership with the Monterey Museum. This is our third or fourth event. At least third. That's important, like when you date for 3 times, right? Anyway, we're getting married. We're moving in. Anyway, it is a very wonderful partnership, I think, because of course art and architecture are very much related to one another. And this is a region where art and architecture are really part of the DNA of this place. And we are responsible for keeping that healthy. That's our job. We both are in business, and we also are, this organization is an organization dedicated to collecting, preserving, sharing, and amplifying and making more visible what's wonderful about this region. So I am very happy that we get to shine a light on architecture. I really just want to say a couple things about the museum that this community ought to be aware of. I'm going to basically say, 3 topics that I want to mention. I'm going to start with the bad news. The bad news is that we're in an era for a little while where public funding for the arts is going to be very, very difficult. We are facing the defunding of the Institute of Museum and Library Sciences, the defunding of the National Endowment for the Humanities, the loyalty oaths against DEI at the National Endowment for the Arts. These are all things that are fundamentally difficult for an organization that stands behind artistic expression and freedom of intellectual inquiry to cope with. And so I want to make sure that if you're not already engaged in some kind of advocacy, that you consider it. It's really important. I got a lovely letter from Adam Schiff, and I think that there are people who are really going to work on this. So we have everywhere to go from here is hopefully to win more ground. And I just want to encourage you to support also arts and cultural institutions. If you're not a member of the museum, I would highly recommend, if you can, to become a member. That's probably the most important thing that you can do for the museum, is just get engaged with us. We do an enormous amount. For $75, you get a lot. If you can give more, we would really appreciate it. What you're seeing around you right now is a really historic exhibition, beautifully curated by Sidney Payton, who went into our archive and found these never been exhibited before mid-century images of Morley bears. And this is a photography exhibit. The subject is architecture, but it's an exhibit about a photographer. All the architects are listed, and you can see them listed in the resource guides that we have. But it's been a really important exhibition for us, and we're just really glad that you all appreciate getting to see these beautiful photos. So you'll also see that there also are other photographers who happen to be architects who are also included in our exhibitions. These shows run until the end of this week, and then they will go away. And what's coming up that I want to, the second thing I want to say to you is that the Monterey Biennial, I'm calling it informally the Baby Biennial because it is our very first year. And in our very first year, the thing we're focusing on is greater access and visibility for the region of artists. So 7 counties, including Monterey County, worth of artists, were invited to submit free of any charge of any kind to a juried exhibition. And we've selected out of 1,000 works, 122 works that'll be seen in all these downstairs galleries starting May 16th. And we have a big event on May 17th, Saturday, all day long. That's a big kind of open house for all the artists. The artists will all be identified. And we invite you to come to that. That's free. And we also are doing something called At the Artist Table, which is a wonderful event for the creative community. And I would highly encourage all of you to consider being supportive of this event. This is going to be a big dinner that we're going to throw down the street on Calle Principal on the solstice night, June 21st, Saturday, June 21st. It'll be drinks and music and great food, kind of a picnic. And then we'll have some maybe dancing afterward and things like that. So it'll be just a really fun party. You can buy tickets for $100 and you get your dinner and everything else free, meaning it's inclusive. We'll also be giving tours with all the artists. So it's just a great chance to hang out with your friends. And if by some chance you're feeling like you want to be a sponsor, we're still looking for sponsors of the event. We would like to raise we've raised about $77,000, and we'd like to get to 100. So if you have it in you to sponsor, we'd be very happy for you to sponsor a table, and we can talk to you about that. So just find me or find Robin or somebody like that. So I'm going to just pass these around, give you some of these. Thank you. Anyway, that's all I really wanted to say, except just that the last thing I want to mention is that you all, as architects, know that we've been working on pre-design for a renovation of not only this building, but also the park and backyard of the adobe that we own, and a historic preservation of the adobe, as well as a renovation of our storage. And over the next 6 months, we really will be coming out more publicly with some of that work for you all to see. So we're doing our very first kind of presentation of it, kind of the finished pre-design, for people tomorrow evening. And I just want to we want to solicit your support and feedback. And so just want to thank AIA for being supportive of it. So we're on our way to sharing more of that with you in the future. So thank you. And without further ado, Erik.
Hopefully that's working. Thank you, Corey. Thank you for our third or fourth partnership. Thank you for coming to the AIA Monterey Bay Arts and Architecture Lecture Series tonight, presented in partnership with the Monterey Museum of Art. And thanks to Corey, as I said, and to Robin and the whole museum staff for sharing this beautiful space with us and helping us produce tonight's event. The AIA Monterey Bay Arts and Architecture Lecture Series was founded a couple of decades or more ago by the late, great modern architect Gerald Lomax, who, after many years in LA, coming out of the case study house movement, moved here to practice, and before his passing in 2014. The landscape architect Bernard Trainer, who's here tonight, and Ground Studio, have generously decided to sponsor an annual talk by an architect, designer, or artist in honor of Jerry and his original mission in founding our Arts and Architecture series. And tonight, I'm very happy to announce, and you can switch to the different side, thank you, to announce that the first Gerald Lomax annual Arts and Architecture lecture will be presented by the great architect and great friend of Jerry, Jim Jennings, which will be scheduled for next fall. So please make sure you're on our mailing list so you get the announcements about the specific dates and time, and thank you, Bernard and Ben, for helping make this happen and doing all the work. I hope you had a chance to look around this beautiful space and at the current exhibition of this architectural photography of Morley Bear, curated by Sidney Payton. Our previous lecture back in February was given by Sidney and focused on this exhibit and Morley's work and was really, truly superb. And if you missed it, please go to the AIA Monterey Bay's YouTube channel, where you can find that and many other of our arts and architecture presentations. And in keeping with the theme of architectural photography, we have such a great event for you tonight. We have certainly one of the best and most admired architectural photographers working today, Joe Fletcher, in a presentation he's calling The Architect and the Photographer, a Collaboration. And when you bring in such a great architectural photographer, it's no surprise that the architects he collaborates with are also at the top of their profession. The three architects tonight on the panel all have long-standing, significant collaborations with Joe, and I'll briefly introduce you to them now, and I know Joe will talk about them and their work during his presentation. First, for our chapter and area, Ann Shicketanz of Studio Shicketanz, who deserves all the credit for making this event happen. Ann has been using Joe as her preferred choice as a photographer for much of her work. She's been practicing in this area for over 3 decades, and along with doing work across the West and Europe, she is a native of Austria, receiving degrees from the Technical University of Vienna and Technical University of Stuttgart before moving to the United States to make her career here. She is past president of AIA Monterey Bay and actually reestablished this Arts and Architecture lecture series after it went dormant for quite a while. Her work has won numerous awards, many of this from this chapter, and is widely published nationally and internationally. We also have Joe Dangaran of Wood Dangaran Architecture and Interiors from Los Angeles. Joe was born in San Francisco and raised in Nevada. He's a graduate of the USC School of Architecture, and he and his partner Brett Woods have created an exceptional firm, winning numerous awards and published widely as well, including a beautiful monograph, which you were showing me today, published in 2022, and this year, I believe, his firm debuted as part of the Architectural Digest magazine's 80-100. And then, last certainly but not least, Greg Faulkner of Faulkner Architects with offices in Truckee and San Francisco. Greg founded his firm in 1998. He was raised in Indiana and worked as an engineer before moving into architecture and receiving a Bachelor of Architecture from the University of New Mexico and a Master of Architecture from MIT. And he's really another star of West Coast architecture. His work has won numerous awards, widely published again, including such publications as GA Houses, Wallpaper, Denzine, and Dwell. That's not a good enough introduction for any of those great architects, but I'll let Joe discuss their works, and I'm excited for us all to see many examples of their exceptional work tonight. They're all leading lights practicing architecture today. So Joe Fletcher was born in London, England. He studied painting at Chelsea College of Art and Design, receiving his BA in Fine Art and later attending London's Goldsmiths University, graduating with an MFA in photography. In 2003, he moved to San Francisco with his Californian wife and started his career in architectural photography. He's published in all the best architecture and shelter magazines, including Wallpaper and Architectural Digest. He's a photographer of at least 2 books on the ranch house, including one focused on the architect Cliff May. And as these 3 exceptional architects on our panel tonight can attest, has earned the trust, appreciation, and admiration of some of the best architects in our country. So please help me welcome Joe Fletcher.
Thank you, Erik. Let me wake up my computer. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Bernard. Thank you, Marianne. I've been asked to talk to you today about being an architectural photographer, and I thought that rather than talk about technique or experiences, I would try to share with you what I love about it. I often get asked what I'm thinking about on a shoot, and I find that question difficult to answer, because other than my clients' wishes, I'm mostly just thinking about light and composition. What does that mean? It means I'm just thinking in the medium of images. To describe that thought process would be akin to describing a piece of music without playing it. The medium exists in its own space and cannot be easily passed to another. All creatives have a vocabulary that they learn on to create. We don't start in a vacuum of ideas. Photographic composition wouldn't exist as it does without the history of art and painting wouldn't exist without all the paintings that came before it. As my old theory of art teacher used to say, if painting didn't exist, you couldn't invent it. So I thought that to describe to you what I'm thinking about when I'm shooting a project, I could give this talk as imagery. I'd like to share with you the images in my life that have touched me and that I return to. These are some of the images that have led me here and keep me fascinated and keen. Then I shall show you some pictures I've taken over my 20 or so years of professional work, and then I'll share pictures I've taken of the work of my 3 esteemed clients with us here today. I grew up in London. My parents loved the arts. Are you concerned about the drumming? The house is filled with art books. A book of collected Impressionism was my favorite. Impressionism came about as photography grew. Painting was no longer needed to document anything. Painting could reinvent itself. Okay. I think it's someone on. Painting could reinvent itself for it's free to consider loftier ideas. What is perception? What emotion is tangible in it? Here's a painting by Monet of some haystacks. And here's another. And another. And another. And another. He painted 25 in total. Perception of an object is inseparable from its environment. Thanks, Erik. Hold on. Thanks, Alex. If you find yourself wondering what your building's material will look and the drum, consider what is the color of hay? The Impressionists and Post-Impressionists concentrated on landscapes, but interiors were a popular theme too. Bonnard liked windows. As did Matisse. Here's a painting of a window at night by Matisse. And here are some interiors by Vuillard. These interiors are deeply personal spaces, inhabited or not. In all these, I feel the space, the presence of the season, and the time of day. A haiku in image form. There's something about the quality of light that Edward Hopper gets that's both real and at the same time magical. Sunlight and moonlight can be that way. Go ahead. Is that good? Okay. You good? You can hear me? Okay. Sunlight and moonlight can be that way, captivating and unreal. The photographer Joe Merowitz made a book called Cape Light. Here are some images from that book. Each place in the world has its own light. California's golden light is a real thing. Take it from an Englishman. Here's a picture by Stephen Shaw. As with the Cape Light pictures, it's so very like an Edward Hopper. Why is that, I wonder? I don't think it's just the similar buildings, it's the quality of the light and the colors too. Rebecca Norris Webb's photographs are so evocative you can smell the dew, the flowers and grass, and the hot air. Here's a painting by Hammershoy of moonlight through a window. And here of sunlight through the same window. This is photographer Francois Hallard. His light is natural and magical, his compositions relaxed. Look at this photo late dusk. It's too dark to really see. That time of day when your eyes dance to find enough light. If an impressionist would have painted the scene, it would have felt the same, I think. Recall Matisse's window at night. This is Luigi Ghiri. He's one of my favorites. His photographs also have a captivating light. His compositions are playful and light and very poetic. His tones are ethereal and dreamy. Here's a wonderful shot of an Aldo Rossi in the snow. A monument made gentle by the falling leafless branches. A multitude of colors embraced by fog. And the Palace of Versailles. Robert Polidori took an endless series of photographs of the refurbishment of Versailles. Like the building, the light seems immortal. Peter Doig's early paintings show the experience of a Corbusier seen through a myriad of trees, the organic madness of nature juxtaposed with the formality of architectural order. Baz Princeton finds the organic in the man-made. His scale is monumental, colossal. Here's some work by Richard Pear. It's seeing his photographs of Tado Ando's work that made me want to become an architectural photographer. Louis Kahn said that the sun never knew how great it was until it hit the side of a building. It's some more Richard Pear. Richard Pear. Toshio Shibata's palette is somber and rich. His compositions are more formal but equally poetic. Like the painter Peter Doig, his work looks at the man-made in nature. Note that his compositions never include the sky. I love this photograph of a red bridge. Now I'll share some of my own work. This is T.W. Ryan in Charlottesville. This is Jim Jennings in Palm Springs. Rick Joy in Polanco, Mexico City. This is a Marmol Radzina prefab house in Desert Hot Springs. Aragonis in Beverly Hills. That's the T.W. Ryan house again in Charlottesville. The Amangiri Hotel. More from the Amangiri. This is Anne Fougeron's house in Big Sur, called Falling House. Fall House. This is Walker Workshop in LA. Rick Joy in Sun Valley. Walker Workshop. Adlin Darling in High Desert. Aragonis in Mexico City. Aragonis told me that for Mexicans living in Mexico City, natural green is the most precious thing. This is a project I recently shot in Medellin, Colombia. This is a Olsen Kundig house in Malibu. I'm pleased to report it's still there. Rick Joy in Turks and Caicos. This house was built to withstand tropical storms. This is a recent shoot by Dust Architects in the desert of Santa Fe. And now I'll share with you some of the photographs of Ann Shicketanz. I think this might be our first project together. I don't know the name of this house. What is it? Tehama 1. This is Tehama 1. This is a house built for a couple who are very much into transcendental meditation. And the center of the courtyard there is actually, the foundation is open so that there's a direct connection to the earth underneath the house without anything in it obstructing it. So the sand that you see there goes directly to the earth under the house. This is the barn. A house in Carmel. And this is Marianne's own house. and a house deep in the woods. And now some work by Woodson Dangaran. So this is Joe Dangaran's work. This is in Palm Springs, looking out across Palm Springs. And again, the same house in the middle of the day. Remember Monet's haystacks? A view from the house, the pool. There's a view of LA in the afternoon, and the same view at night. This is Greg Faulkner's work, Faulkner architecture. This is in Red Rock, above Vegas. Greg's a cowboy at heart and loves a fire. And this is the first time that fire was set alight, and I was a little anxious about doing it. This is that same project, the interior. This is a project that Greg did with Tom Kundig of Olsen Kundig. Through the trees. This is in Martis Camp. Another in Tahio. It's the interior of that house. This is a project in Orinda. This house really had just been finished and there was no landscaping up front. If you see just in front of the chaise there, that's actually dried leaves that the contractor had collected from the entire neighborhood and laid down over mud. I haven't been able to use that device again, but it was really neat. And this is a project up in the hills above Hillsborough that I'm going to return to this week on Thursday to shoot again. If I take you to a building or show you a picture of a building, those are very different experiences. One is the medium of architecture and the other is not. The latter is the medium of imagery. A photograph of a building cannot recreate the experience of a building. It is a response in another medium to the experience of being there, and indeed being there on that day then, with that light, and as that person. An image of a building is a poem, a song, an ode to the building, and thus it is personal to the author. For me, a good photographer of buildings embraces that rather than fights it. Because it's easy to consider photography as just a descriptor, as a way to document. Architectural photography especially can be treated this way. Everything straight, everything in focus, nothing too dark or too light, formulaic composition, the materials uniform and consistent. Show all that was done, document the work. Documentation is important, of course, but I believe it can be so much more. The photography can be evocative, emotional, captivating. And isn't that what you want from your architecture too? To be emotive, to be poetic. I don't claim to have achieved that, but it's the goal that brings me joy. Thank you.
So I would invite all the panelists to come up and take their seat. You can turn on
The most compelling images that Joe shoots for us, at least for me as an architect, and it also results in kind of the most popular images online, is the ones that create or at least allow us to see the architecture as the aperture to the landscape. And so I've chosen about a half a dozen photos that the architecture almost recedes. And it makes me so happy because pretty soon the eye is focusing on the landscape and no one, I mean, everybody talks about this tree, right? They don't care about the windows or the ceiling or whatever, but And so I really love that about Joe's work, and it's always the ones we talk about, like that moment right there is very precious to me. But then I threw this in just because Joe and I have lots of discussions about how to shoot the work, and we text constantly if I'm not there, and go back one. But then in the end, I probably only affect a half a dozen photos, and the rest is all Joe, and then he pulls up this, this abstraction of a part of the house that I'd never saw before. I mean, we designed it, but I never saw that kind of view of it. And when the architecture completely disappears, and it's this kind of, just this amazing image, that's the most cool thing, because I'm not there either. The architecture's not there, it's just Joe and the light and the mirroring, and I mean, you can just go on and on. Okay.
Thank you. Marianne, I think you're the next one.
Yeah, this was actually not yet meant to be for this particular segment, but that's fine. So I realized relatively late, I think, in my career how important photography is, that it really it is what will stay out there about your work, And even for yourself, when you have had a long career, what you don't photograph, you just gets forgotten, and you forget it yourself too, So that was one thing. And then finding the right person is also really important, because you not only do you spend the day together, I also think the energy between the photographer and myself also reflects at the end of the day, because you spend the whole day together. If there's tension, it will show in the photographs. If there's not a really warm relationship, I think it also shows in the photographs. So finding your match, I think as an architect, is really important. So yeah, I have greatly enjoyed working with Joe for that many years. And we always have a shot list, of course, but then I really like leaving the house to you, and then just you show me what you see, and that's very educational and a lot of fun. And what I only had just selected 2 images to show the difference of how the same space can feel completely different. This is shot by 2 different photographers. So the first one is Joe's, and it has an intimacy and a warmth, I find, that when you look at the second image, it is a completely different house. It's the same space, but I think it feels completely different. It has this very, masculine, I think, I don't know. It's a good architectural shot, but it doesn't, I think, reflect the feeling of the house as well as Joe's shot does.
Thank you. And Joe?
All right. Do you want to go to the first one, John?
I'm not doing it.
Oh, you're not?
Yeah.
No.
It's the drums in my head.
Oh, it sounds good. I feel like I am, I think, the most recent collaborator with Joe, and I use that word with as much humility as I can. Joe, we started our relationship maybe 3.5, 4 years ago with a cold email to Joe, basically begging him to work with us. He saw something in our work at that point that is now translated to our website and a monograph that came out in 2022 as our first real project together. In about 6 months, I think we photographed 7 homes, and so we got to know each other very, very well, very quickly. And I think to be up here with Marianne and Greg and Joe, it's very, very humbling for me and for Brett, my business partner, in the work that we do. This is a home in Los Angeles. It's really a study in travertine, a very difficult site, but Our process with Joe is really to kind of let Joe be Joe. I think and we can go to the next one. I think this is a kind of detail shot of some of that travertine. This is a home in Beverly Hills. Keep going, I want to get to the first. This is, I think, enigmatic, I think might be a word. I think, Joe, that your presentation, I haven't seen that kind of level of, I know you're a trained artist and we've talked about that in painting, but I'm a huge impressionist fan and I see that in your work now. I've never made that connection, but I think a photo like this, it's not documentation, it's impression. It's what is the context, the space, the architecture, the feeling. What's that impression on you? And then how do you represent that and try to capture that moment, I think is really, really, really powerful. We can go to the next one. Landscape, natural materials, it's really a big part of our work. Joe has always been able to capture that relationship just so well. This is actually the homeowner swimming in the pool, a kind of very mid-century lifestyle shot at a Craig Elwood restoration. Original koi pond, original olive tree, and some light intervention.
Can I just say?
Yes, please.
This always makes me laugh, this picture, because there were only actually 3 koi in that pond, maybe 4, and it just didn't feel right. So I just kept shooting it, and then we duplicated them. So I feel like I have to admit this to everybody. It's my confession.
Yeah, confess. I would never do that. I would never share.
It's been on my mind.
Oh, yeah, right? We can go to the next one. This, again, to what I think Greg and Mary Ann were just describing, this is a home in Santa Monica, urban context. We've been to that site 100 times, never stepped across the street and took this photo. It's not about the house. It's about the house in relationship to everything else that's going on. And this beautiful tree and that sculptural form. I don't even see the house. I see the tree, just like Greg's talking about with his home. This is one of our favorite images that Joe's ever captured. And the truth is, this is a side yard in Los Angeles. There's only about 6 feet between the glazing and that, 12, 14-foot podocarpus, but I love how Joe has so creatively clipped the ceiling, kind of similar to some of the artists you're saying, never showing the sky. That glazing is infinite, and it just lets your mind wander and lets you just place yourself in there, and it's just very peaceful. This is another view of that same home, but with some of the layered landscapes, and again, placing you in that space. We're not sitting in the bathtub, but you can put yourself in that bathtub and imagine seeing Los Angeles beyond. This to me is an image that captures everything. That's Joe in the field. There are rattlesnakes everywhere around those boulders. And I was fortunate enough to be there and just kind of, Joe's never said it, but I'm sure he feels me like over his shoulder, not trying to micromanage, but really capture. And I knew something special was happening in this moment, and trying to capture him, and I think the next image is that image. And I feel like we can go to the next one as well. I'm talking a little much as I do, but the reflection of the landscape off of these structures just gives it so much life. And again, it's not about the structure at all, but this is 1966 Craig Elwood, and obviously direct translation to Lomax, but these olive trees and then the layering of that to the home. Part of, I think, what we feel is so fortunate in working with Joe and collaborating is that on some level, he's really been the representation of our work at the kind of birth of our career. And we would be absolutely fine not working with any other photographers. I think this is my personal home with my wife, Sapna. Again, urban landscape, creeping fig up but a very simple, on the surface, a simple shot. But again, that mirror, this is one of my favorite photos that Joe's taken of the San Gabriel Mountains beyond. And then
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Oh. I'm wondering how each of you would think about how this kind of photography has affected your careers and the growth of your careers and your firms and the importance of that in your development. Do you want to, Marianne, do you want to?
The importance of the photography of your work can't be overestimated, because when I started out, I thought you had to send scouting shots, right, to magazines, and I thought you could take those yourself and then send them in, and somebody would then send somebody to a professional photography. But that I learned over time that's not how it works. So you do need really good photography right out of the gate in order to be able to present it to the world. So photography is really, I think, key. That's what stays, especially over a long period of time. These homes go through renovations, or who knows what people do with it. I think then it's really, really important for the future to know what this was intended to look like when you built it.
Well, I think the same. I mean, we would be nowhere really without the photography of our work. It's really how you share what you're doing with the world, and then no one can go visit these houses or these projects. So this is really the way the work is perceived. And so, and I had used some photographers, like you did a comparison, and we won't name names, but I had used photographers before Joe, but that was quite a while ago. But not only did I get, in working with Joe, get this sort of high level of photography, but I also got this relationship with Joe where he's in my head all the time now, because he makes cracks and makes comments when we're shooting the work, and we talk about the criticism of the work and what do you think about this and what do you think about that. And so we've kind of grown together a little bit, kind of over the course of the years. And so really it's I think hypercritical to have a great photographer shoot your work.
I think it works to have a relationship ongoing over a period, because there's a lot of trust involved in it. If you've got 1 or 2 days to shoot a project you've been working on for 4 years, it pays to have a relationship. You can trust somebody. And likewise, it pays for me to know that you trust me, because it's a lot of stress on the photographer too.
Well, and if you do have a consistent approach with the same person, and there happen to be someone like Joe who's brilliant, there's a consistency in the photography and in the presentation of the work that goes all the way through the projects. And so many times, we've either submitted our work for an award or whatever, and the people come back, and the first thing they say is, wow, what a group of luscious photographs you have, right? It's the work is the second thing they talk about, but the first work is, your photographs are amazing. So
It's okay. The people say that about my camera. It's a fantastic camera.
Well, I also think that in this space, it's a perfect moment to be here, and obviously that is by design and really, really well done. I mean, an amazing space. Look at this photography and this work around us, and I love that this is an exhibit about the photographer, not the architects. The architects are listed. You have to go and find them. But I can absolutely imagine in however many years, even tomorrow, Joe's work in a space like this, and you'd see that consistency or that approach to a variation of architect's work, but capturing whatever it is, that enigma that you're trying to capture. And it, back to your question, Erik, I think that it's in just our firm and the kind of youth of our firm, and since 12 years since we founded up here, with decades of amazing work between these 3 talented people, I think that our collaboration and trust and relationship with Joe is really the way that our architecture is communicated. I think it's so critical in internally. We kind of talk of imagery as either explanatory or experiential. And many times the explanatory can get us as architects into trouble or tricky situations with clients or consultants, et cetera. But the experience of that space is really everything. And I think as an architect, it's one of the most sad things that we can work on a project for 3, 4, 5, 10 years, be involved in the construction. After the photography shoot, 2 days, 3 days, we may never see that space again. We may never be able to experience that when, yes, clients have invested, but the architects and the greater team have as well. And so that photography is the memory.
Mies van der Rohe said, shoot it and forget about it.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, all of us are residential architects, right? So
Yes,
that's for
yes.
us that is so important
Yes.
because if it's a public building,
Yes.
it lives, you know, it's accessible.
Yeah.
But residentials are not. Yeah.
I'm wondering whether each of you want to elaborate on that relationship we're kind of talking about between the experience of a building, which I think architects kind of focus their design process on, and the image, and how, maybe with Joe, how that experience of the work inspires how do you want to express that in your images?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I was trying to talk about in the talk, was this idea that, you know, the photography has its own thing. And when you go to shoot a project and talk to the architect about it, you're always making this translation between what their, you know, the hopes and expectations for the building were and their intentions were and how they arrived at this thing. I used to have a teacher at art school, and he would always refer to your paintings or your work as your children. And he said you have to let them go and live in the world and let them be themselves, which I always thought was pretty funny, but I think it's true with any creative act, that you put all this intent into it and then it becomes this thing. And then in terms of photography, it's then going to become something else yet again. And like Greg says, when you first see the images, I imagine it is very weird because you've worked on this for so long, and then it's become this other experience altogether. But that is how we are sharing architecture now, and have done for so long. I mean, it's how if anybody thinks of their top 10 favorite buildings, how many of those have you been to? You know, they're not your favorite buildings, they're your favorite photographs of buildings.
Right. Well, I think in relation to art, I personally love art that allows the viewer to impress upon it whatever their mood might be of that day or in that moment. And you may look at that same painting or piece of art or photograph over the course of your life in different times of day, different moods, et cetera, and you're going to have a different impression and different experience with it. And that, I think again, it's not documentation. Technically it is, but there's artistry in that where you can project upon it. There's enough abstraction, I think, in those images. It's not, and I think, Marianne, your comparison was really on point. I think very, very powerful where, yeah, we'll get these images from Joe and we'll say, we've never even imagined that. And it's I think that is a true collaboration, and that's built upon trust and relationship. One photo that didn't make it up there is an image of me and Joe having tacos in a garage during a shoot. Joe loves tacos, and I think he's had tacos with everyone up here and probably all of his. You know, technically we are clients of his, but we're collaborators and friends, and that's why the work is powerful. It's not the architecture.
I think it's important. Sorry, Marianne, go on.
I do want to know how he got permission to take a picture of you while you were shooting.
I know.
It's a good question.
How did you
It's
do
usually
that?
I
That's
asked
a
if I could
strict-
include. I know.
No.
I know.
He's been keeping that one in secret until today.
Yeah.
Now it's
But
out.
he shared about the koi. I wasn't going to
Yeah.
do that.
My great joy is to have these wonderful clients and to have them trust me and to go back to projects is actually I get to see their work evolve, and that is a wonderful. That's something that really precious to me that I get is to see. You know, if Greg calls me, you got a new project. It's like, what's he up to this time? You know, or if Joe says, oh, we got this project going on in if it's somewhere new that they've never done a project in, that's when I get really kind of excited.
And I get nervous that that maybe Joe thinks the work's not good enough and that he doesn't want to go and shoot it. Will there be a day that that's the case? I hope not. I hope it never comes. That's the challenge. I think that's the challenge. Yeah, that's true. It's like, is this work good enough for Joe? Yeah.
That's ridiculous, but
It's true.
And I think another interesting question is how in this age of social media and Instagram and everything else where you just see these images which now represent architecture for so many people. And as we were trained as architects, like you say, we didn't go to a lot of these buildings, and we were just knew and learned and were inspired by one image or another of these things that may not have anything to do with that experience. Now it seems to be just the proliferation of those kind of images over the world. I wonder how that affects the training of architects, how that affects the public's perception of architecture. I don't know if you have any thoughts on any of that.
May I say something, Erik, on that? I mean, it's lovely to hear everyone wax lyrical about how great my photography is, and I don't want it to stop, but I will say that I think there is a difficulty with photography playing such an important role in architecture, in that, as I touched on in the talk, it's its own medium, and I often wonder whether that's detrimental to architecture, because we're so reliant on a project working in the medium of photography, and I wonder how that's influenced architecture over the years, because I've been to buildings which, like people, buildings can be photogenic, and some buildings I'll go to and it's like, oh, it's really obvious where you're going to get the great shots and they're going to look fantastic and it's got this amazing view. And it may not actually be the most wonderful building to be in. And likewise, you can go to projects which are kind of tricky. You can't find the shots. There's different rooms and the lighting's tricky, but they're wonderful projects. And so sometimes I feel at a loss then that I'm doing a disservice to architecture. So I think it's a double-edged sword in that regard. I think that the introduction of people using video and other media are writing about architecture, but I feel that the shame is that it's a weird thing for an architectural photographer to say, but it's a kind of a shame that there's so much being shared now, image-wise, on Instagram, what have you, that I fear that people aren't going to buildings, that they feel that that's the experience, is that great shot. It's a bit the same with landscapes. Like people get these, these landscape moments, but they're not going to the parks, Anyway, sorry to bring it down.
Any architects have any thoughts on those?
It's a two-edged sword, right? I mean, Instagram has made you don't have to wait so long. The time component now, once you get the building done, and depending on publication and award submittals and all of that, it's just so much more connected to everyone because there's so many people, and it's an interesting thing to look at architecture. I think a lot of people, I mean, I'm an architect, so my feed is architecturally based, but if you build a Instagram kind of feed that is curated, it's an educational tool, and every day you're just like pounding images and understanding what someone did and learning about the way they approach the architecture. So yeah, it's overexposed probably,
but then it's also a wonderful thing. People are sharing so much architecture.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got some, shots from all three of the architects here I've had. They are so popular on Instagram, and they keep getting reposted like every day. The same shot, you see it again, and it just lives forever, and that's a wonderful thing. I don't think, I don't imagine Morley Bears had the, when he did a shot, it went in a publication, and some people saw it, but he couldn't have that kind of proliferation of his work. And how wonderful is that? It's great that way.
I also think it goes to editing. For us, again, our internal process, and at least when we're kind of looking at Joe's imagery or renderings or drawings or whatnot, and maybe this goes back to school, for me, maybe everything goes back to me, but less really is more. And if it doesn't, we always ask the question, if it doesn't help, it hurts. And it's very black and white for us in making these decisions. And so we try to limit the amount of images out there. If Joe sends us 25 images that he really loves, we may select 10 that go on our website and that are used. And so
I think you do that really well.
I think the editing part of it, and this is a total segue, but I think part of Joe's strength also as a photographer, and maybe this goes back to your education as a painter, is the composition. Maybe I made this up in my head, but I don't think that you crop your photos post. You crop in situ, frame the shot, and there's no cropping.
No, I don't
on the screen later. And I think that is such a powerful thing, because even if it's digital, you're treating it like film, which is really amazing. And that composition, back to the Impressionist paintings, composition is everything, in my opinion, in art. And that's the same with photography, whether it's architecture or landscape or whatever it might be.
I agree. I mean, it's hard, it's as much about what you leave out as what you include.
Heather, I think since there's so many people in the room that are architects and are interested in questions, I'm going to open it up, and I see a hand waving, so I'm going to... Okay. 1 second, let me give you a... Matt.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Erik. My name is Matthew Sant, and I'm not an architect, and I want to thank you guys for putting this thing on, or Mary Ann for putting this on and being consistent about it. I appreciate the AIA Monterey Bay sending me the invites to these events, and I'll continue to attend. I want to ask Joe, first I want to point out, these are very good photographs. I'm impressed. And you're a lucky man, lucky boy, when your parents were turning you on to the world of art and architecture and whatnot. You have a good vertical eye. I noticed all your photographs are perfectly aligned with curtains and columns and
My clients wouldn't have it any other way.
That's right. That's right. And I wanted to ask you, tell us about your cameras and which cameras do you use on a regular basis? And then I'll tell you a story about Mr. Lomax.
All right, it's a deal. I'll keep mine short. It's boring.
Okay.
I use a Fuji GFX camera. It's a digital camera. For years, I shot with film. I started in film, started on 4x5. I'm glad I did. I think that's kind of part of where I learned the kind of the process of really figuring it out in camera. Yeah, the move to digital is great, though.
Yeah.
I'm glad not to have to carry film through airport security anymore.
Right. Okay, so my quick story about Jerry Lomax. So the opening line in Out of Africa, Isaac Denison's, Karen Blixen's book, is I once had a farm in Africa. And my line is I once had a used bookstore in Monterey. And because of that, I was able to access some very interesting libraries like Joan Fontaine's and Jerry Lomax. He had passed a year or so before I was invited by his wife to go to the house in Sand City and look at all the books. And many of them were kept by his wife, but she was willing to let go of many books. I ended up walking out with about 120 pounds worth of books, which came out to about 4 boxes. I captured these books, paid for these books, and immediately put them on the website. And within 2 weeks, I got a call from a gentleman in Southern California who says that his architect who built his standalone library in his back 40 was a student, I suppose, a student of Jerry Lomax. And as a gift to this young architect, he wanted to buy all the Jerry Lomax books that I had just bought 2 weeks prior. So I packed them all up and sent them down to one of the fancy neighborhoods in Southern California. I don't know, Malibu, Pasadena, whatever it is. Anyway, aside from buying the books and shipping them off to Southern California, I've got a close-up look at the Jerry Lomax building in Sand City, which is very impressive. Thank you.
Yeah, we do a lot of our presentations there. So, Jim?
Thank you. This is just wonderful. There's a question here somewhere, but I'm going to start with a story. And thinking of your image of Tadao Ando in the beginning, and he was one of the first one or two architects as a young architecture student that introduced me to modern architecture, I suppose, and fell in love with him and still am. And 1990, however long ago that was, spent a summer in Japan, and part of that trip was a rail pass around Japan and kind of tracking down Ando buildings. And the one that really comes to mind was, I don't remember the name of it, one of the chapels in Hokkaido, and it had this amazing kind of water element. And thinking of the photographs of it and how pristine it was and how beautiful it was, and then going there and realizing that it was a wedding chapel at a ski resort, and that behind you was these terrible 5-story 1970s condo buildings, and that how the editing process of photography is so different than the reality of architecture. And that you go to visit this building, and if you look this way, I see what I see in the pictures, and I turn around and there's this terrible ski resort. And so this conversation around the difference between the reality of architecture and experience in real life and then experience in photograph, it's a highly, highly edited process. And it's not just what you're seeing, but it's what you're not seeing, I think. So I'm not quite sure what the question is, but...
Yeah, it comes like that. That's the wonderful thing about photography, is that you can edit so carefully, which you can't do with video. I mean, you can do, but you have to be a lot more careful. I think I think some people ask me, is it, one of the questions that come up, is it okay to take out, smoke alarms and things, retouch them out? And I think it is, because I think the flip side to photography is that it really heightens anything in there, I mean, Greg, you were talking earlier about the shot. There's one of the shots of Red Rock where there's literally porta potties just to the right of the shot, and when you're there, you as an experience, coming back to the experience of architecture rather than the photography of architecture, the experience, you wouldn't notice the porta potties that much. They're just kind of there. But you take a picture, and boy, are they there. They're really present. So you do have to be very careful with photography that way. And that's why I think it's always valid to take out smoke alarms. Because when you walk into a room, you don't notice all the things on the ceiling. But you take a picture of it, and you really do.
In that way, it's aspirational, right? It's the creative process of trying to experience that space and then kind of take that on creatively as to what the architect or the owner or whatever might have aspired it to be.
Well, it's terribly unfair on an architect, isn't it? That if you've created a space like Dyar has in that circumstance, that then people's impression of it would be ruined by the surroundings. So I think it's very fair to distill it down to what the intention was. I'm jealous of your trip.
Good evening. Thanks for the talk here. It kind of clicked in my mind as we were all talking about it, is that, really the camera seems to be the first inhabitant of the space. You've got these spaces that we as architects are so analytical about, and then you've got the camera really kind of being that first chance to distill it in a very personal and human way. I found that fascinating. So my question would be, it always seems like there's some presence in your photos, right? Like Greg's fireplace that's just been lit, or the chairs that just seem like they're about to be occupied. There were 2 photographs that I noticed, the Mexico City and the koi fish one, that you actually had, the actual owners or presumptive owners occupying. And I was curious how that relationship works when you've got that sort of third leg of the triangle, right, between the architect who's the designer and the photographer is almost like the, if you consider the buildings your children, it's almost like the midwife, right, that brings that child to creation. And that third leg is really the owner and their interaction. So just curious about that. Thank you.
Do you think of me as your midwife? I think it's nice to put people in the pictures. That's often a question I got asked about people. And I think by putting, you don't want it to feel lifeless. So I think, if you include something like a chair or kind of something which signifies presence, I think that's a lovely way of introducing that. I think when you actually put people in it, it can get problematic. I mean, you know, if it's the homeowners themselves, often they don't want to be in a picture. And then if it's not the homeowners, that's kind of weird. Like if it's the architect's assistant floating in a picture, like what are they doing there? And I always want the pictures to feel something honest. So that's something I always find tricky. But I think like if someone's swimming or someone's reading or it's something quieter, it doesn't take too much attention, I think it works well.
I know we've talked about this quite a bit because some periodicals require it, or they ask for, you know, people in the photos, but we've always talked about this, and I've come around to it because I think that when there's a focus of human presence in the photo, it's hard for the viewer to get into the photo.
I think that's where I was going to go.
Yeah.
Early, I think in the first few projects that we photographed in our work, we've been very inspired by mid-century architecture in Los Angeles and case study, and we always loved those lifestyle shots of, right, the case study 22 with the martini glasses and the skyline and whatnot. And so early on, we made a very strong point to put people in the photographs, but I think back to that point, I think you just nailed it on the head. If there's a person in the photograph that almost doesn't allow you, again, to project into that photograph and put yourself into it, that's a photograph of someone else occupying that space rather than
It's also
you.
the first thing you look at.
Right.
You don't look at the building first.
But the chair or the window opening or the shoes that are left by the door implies that someone has either just been there or is just leaving, and it allows you to
Or you could
occupy.
be there.
Or exactly, it allows you to be there.
I think that where it lies with the idea that you're there, I think those are the images I like the most. I mean, that goes back to the paintings, you know, that you're sharing that stuff. You don't feel like you're a weird imposter in the space. You feel like you're part of it. A role play.
Do you have any particular recommendations on how you prepare? Obviously, the architecture is done, and you're ready to come to the site, and how you, when you get there, what you need to find to really make the most of that shoot and that day in terms of, I don't know whether it means styling or the furnishings, or what you need to really maximize the opportunity.
Tacos.
Tacos, other than, yeah, lunch, that's lunch, obviously.
Clean windows.
Clean windows, yeah.
Very clean windows.
Clean windows. In fact, the Palm Springs house of Joe's that I showed earlier, they had, this is awful, they had so many windows, and they paid for them all to be cleaned the night before I came in, and that night there was a unexpected thunderstorm, and then the following morning they paid for the windows to be cleaned again, this day later, and we got up early to look around, and there was this amazing morning light with the sun just hitting the building, and it's just exploding, which is in the set there. But people were cleaning the windows, and I was just I don't think I've ever gone to sleep as anxious as I did that night, hoping that this event will happen again the next day. Unfortunately, it did. In answer to your question, though, I think just having everything, I mean, this is kind of a boring thing to say, but having everything styled and ready to go is everything. You know, if you're trying to do things on the day or clean things up or move furniture on the day, it eats through time like crazy. Yeah.
And in the day, it's such a, maybe you want to talk about this too, is that it seems like there's this, that's the art of it too, this improvisation of finding the right shot, finding the right light, and it's all happening so quickly.
Yeah.
You only have so much time to do it if you're there for 8 hours or whatever it might be.
Yeah, there's a phrase which is you don't take a great photo, a great photo takes you. And I really believe that for photography, and so I think the key thing is on a shoot is somehow to chill out and be present and keep walking around, and then you'll see it. You go, oh, great. The best photos are the ones that are the easiest to take, I think.
Thank you, Joe and all. Jeff Froke. But your most recent comments all across remind me, some may know you, Newell Jacobson, and rather clever fellow and interesting and funny. And if you know Joe, you may have heard him talk about Jesus Christ. And what he means when he will say, he'll talk about his houses. Of course, he's very, very into his own architecture, as he should be. And he says every one of his houses has Jesus Christ in it. And what he means by that, because that'll take people back for a moment, he says, when you walk into my house, you should say, Jesus Christ. And I'm thinking now about photography, really, for the first time in yours that were being interpreted, is you might be the one who could get Jesus to sit for you because he's never there when the next person comes in.
Anyone else? I'll let the panel conclude then is maybe the final sentence or so about what it means to work with Joe and however you'd like to express that.
A quick thing, and that's that this has been a love fest for Joe, but honestly, in my work, when I find someone that is like a flow with me, and there's never a crossword, and all these years we've never had any kind of, contentious discussion about anything. And so, aside from all the technical skill and the eye that he has, just having someone that's kind of on your side of the table and cool and but you vibe with is critical in business, I think, and it's like the key.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you that you still work with us.
Thank you.
Since you do all this fantastic big work. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that we often joke, and I was sharing with Greg and Marianne, that if you have a problem with Joe, that's not his problem, that's your problem. He's a great person, great collaborator, and I think exactly what Greg just said, whether it's in business or in life, we try to surround ourselves with the very best people first, respectful, compassionate people. It's a true collaboration with everyone in our studio, all of our consultants, and really collaborators with people like Joe. I mean, it's funny, we don't often have a shot list or anything like that. I think that we show up to a property and really kind of just open the door and let Joe do what Joe does best, and we end up with having just an amazing day. I want to schedule shoots just to hang out with Joe. I think that's and yeah, I hope we're collaborating for a long time. It's been a fun and very quick 4 years or whatever it's been.
This love fest is getting too much.
I know.
But I'm so grateful to my clients. I mean, taking architectural photography is being a photographer is great fun, but the best part of what's happened in my life is having the relationships with architects. And it's just such a thrill to see them progress, and to have this ongoing, and having a relationship where you get to turn up to work and be with friends is, that's what I've ended up with, and it's completely wonderful. So thank you to you guys, really.
Thank you all. Thanks. Joe Dangaran, Greg Faulkner, Ann Shicketanz, Joe Fletcher. Thank you all.